Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Buying your electricity from the big energy companies is now the most expensive way to power your home. In fact, the average electricity bill in Australia has more than doubled in the last 15 years, but not for the ones who went solar. Unlike your electricity bill, the price of solar has actually come down, and there's also government rebates available. So what are you waiting for? Join the 2 million households already saving hundreds of dollars every year. See how much your roof could be making you at solarpowerco.com.au. Go solar and get $500 cash back with the Solar Power Co, Australia's most trusted solar brand. solarpowerco.com.au.
Are you looking to change your destiny in life? Be your own boss? Start your own business? If you are, you need people who understand your needs and are committed to helping you make it happen. At DKP & Co Chartered Accountants, we are more than just accountants. We are business advisors, taxation consultants, and strategists that specialise in setting up businesses. We understand the client and give them the very best customised advice and strategies to achieve their goals. Visit our website dkpco.com.au or give us a call today on 03 9023 9370. Fast, proactive, personal. That's DKP & Co Chartered Accountants.
Buying your electricity from the big energy companies is now the most expensive way to power your home. In fact, the average electricity bill in Australia has more than doubled in the last 15 years, but not for the ones who went solar. Unlike your electricity bill, the price of solar has actually come down, and there's also government rebates available. So what are you waiting for? Join the 2 million households already saving hundreds of dollars every year. See how much your roof could be making you at solarpowerco.com.au. Go solar and get $500 cash back with the Solar Power Co, Australia's most trusted solar brand. solarpowerco.com.au.
You're listening to the State of Our Football Nation on FNR.
Well, we're back for another program. It's a Zoom option once again because of the disruption and the lockdowns right across much of the country. George Donikian being joined by Josh Parish as usual. State of Our Football Nation. And boy, do we have a lot to get through. Josh, how are you? Have you coped through what's been a complex week, because there's been so much said, so much spoken about. We've seen overseas some disruption as well, and I'm talking about disruption on the pitch. As a referee, you would have been mortified to see what happened in France, the League One game between Marseille and Nice. Not so nice.
No, that's the moment as a referee when you realise that no one really cares about your cards or your whistle anymore, and you leg it the hell out of there. That's what you do.
Yeah. What did you make of that? It's not the sort of imagery we want at any time. But with fans around, they've been held back for about a year. And it's awkward to say the least. What have you made of it?
Yeah, they were just insane things that we don't usually see at any level of football. But it did remind me of something way back in the, I think, early 2000s that happened in the NBA, the Malice at the Palace. And there's a great documentary about that.
I do remember
which
that.
I believe is a 30 for 30 ESPN doco. And it's interesting that in both cases, the crowds entirely modelled their expectations of what they were supposed to do on the behaviour of the players to the initial kind of spark and incident.
Yeah.
I mean, the situation in the Malice in the Palace was the water bottle being thrown back into the stands, and then suddenly it's fair game. It's game on. So, you know, I'm not saying I blame the players for what happened, but you have to be very careful, because in that kind of situation as a player, everyone's looking at you and you're the one standing on the powder keg with a potentially lit fuse. So Yeah, it's sort of where this kind of social norms and expectations go out the window when they suddenly see a player responding, aggressively to aggression from the stands.
I was going to say, if you can reflect back, I'm wondering if you remember the incident. There was a guy called Eric Cantona playing for Manchester United.
I don't remember it, but I've seen it since.
Okay. If you've seen it, then you will know what I'm about to say. He did something that half the audience went, "Yeah, do it." The person deserves a kicking or being told to get back. And then there was the other half of the audience that went, "What are you doing?" And it's almost it's akin to the actions that happened in a one-day game between Australia and I think it was the West Indies, where some people ran onto the pitch, some streakers, and a rather strong Australian cricketer gave them the shoulder. In other words, he buried his shoulder into one of the streakers as they ran by and then held him down while the police gathered him. Again, a lot of the audience going, "Fantastic, well done." And there were others saying, "What are you doing, Mark? What are you doing?" So it's an enormous challenge in modern day sport to keep that fine line. We never want to see a player attacked. We've seen it in tennis in a gruesome happening in the French Open many, many years ago. And a young tennis player was traumatized by a fan or a serial pest who ran onto the pitch or ran onto the tennis court at the time, and security weren't looking with sufficient intent, and she was stabbed. Monica Seles was the player. A terrible thing, and I think her career, almost ceased after that, or as a meaningful contender for the main titles. Monica Seles was never the same. So it just goes to show you that there are enormous repercussions. And I just hope that the French League comes down hard. They say they want to talk to both clubs. Again, it's the old story. Marseille has some troublesome fans. They've got to get on top of them, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous thing when the players and the fans suddenly, the kind of invisible fourth wall between them suddenly evaporates. Speaking of the Cantona incident, I'm not sure if you have heard the Jonathan Pierce radio commentary of that particular incident.
No,
it's one of the greatest calls of all time, I think.
Which way did he come down?
Well, I mean, it was just condemnation of Cantona. He did at one stage say, of course he was provoked or whatever, but it's the most dramatic, overblown thing you've ever heard in your life. And the funny thing is, he's already condemning him before the kick even happens, after the red card.
Wow.
It's just like,
wow.
Where can there be a place in the game for a man of such extravagant talent, for a man of such wicked temperament? And then he kicks the fan, and it just goes up another level. It's like...
just goes to show you.
He should be thrown out of the game for that sort of intent. It's good looking up that commentary if you get a chance.
Okay, I'll mark it on my little log of things to do between now and next week. And by the way, we've just received word, which is why I was looking at something else when you were talking. Carl Robinson from the Western Sydney Wanderers will join us next week.
Brilliant.
And he'll bring us up to speed with what's going on behind the scenes with the Wanderers. They've got new players to, make sure they fit into the club. I see that Dimitri Petratos has left Saudi Arabia and has returned to Australia. And as an old Blacktown City boy, or as a Blacktown boy, he'll be very comfortable playing for the Western Sydney Wanderers.
Yeah, I can see him becoming something of a cult hero at Western Sydney. I mean, he's trademarked free kicks if he can bang a couple of those into the top corner. I mean, he's...
Go on, keep going.
I was just going to say, he's a player that, when you look at the sort of Opta statistics, as I'm prone to do sometimes, he comes in very highly. And I think he maybe is slightly underrated in terms of his chance creation. And a lot of that is from dead balls, from set pieces. But, those goals from set pieces are just as valuable as any other kind of goal. And that's something that Western Sydney can capitalise on. He's an expert over the dead ball. And I'm not sure they've had a particular dead ball specialist since... maybe it's a stretch to say Shinji Ono. It's been a while anyway. I think he'll be a valuable acquisition. He comes in really highly in the sort of chance creation stats So
There's something very special to be said about players who can excite fans with those thunderous dead ball moments. I can remember as a youngster being mesmerised by a guy called Peter Lorimer, who had the capacity to hit a football like it was a cannon. You know, he had a remarkable right foot, and when he put it through the ball, the nets would move in a manner that wouldn't for others. And of course, the commentators that would go up about 20 decibels at the same time when they were calling the action. And we see it with the great Brazilian superstars who managed to score some tremendous goals from free kicks. And we mustn't forget the great Charlie Yankos and that almighty free kick against Argentina in the Centennial Cup game played in Sydney. I was there, and let me tell you, there wasn't a person at the ground who wasn't jumping up and talking about it for the next week. It was just the most fantastic thing to see when you see a goalkeeper left pointless, and even the players, look at one another and go, "Did you see that?" Then that's something. And Beckham has done it. Ronaldo has done it. Messi, of course, has done it, and continues to do it. And there is something. And when Petrados and others have done it locally, it's pretty exhilarating.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up some of those statistics, and I remember where I saw it. It was a couple of years ago that this stat went out across the Opta feeds, but Dimitri Petrados has created, or had created in 2019 at the end of the year, 179 scoring chances across his last 3 A-League seasons, which was 67 more than any other player in the competition. I think it was Diego Castro who came in next. And also, the most chances created were against the Western Sydney Wanderers. He held the record, at least at that time, for the most chances created against Western Sydney. So I think I'll be happy at least they don't have to face him.
Well, Carl Robinson will be absolutely thrilled to hear that. That's actually quite some effort. If you think to yourself, he's ended up way ahead of Diego Castro. That is quite a notch to have on your CV, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he'd played, I think, 10 more games in that space of time, but still, the ratio was still quite incredible. So,
well done.
Certainly on the metrics, he comes in quite highly. So, it's an attack that didn't quite click and didn't quite generate what we expected it might based on the sum of its parts. So maybe he can knit that together this season.
And they've got an Israeli boy who made quite an impact at Wellington Phoenix, now playing for them. So if you remember that goal that he scored at Bankwest late in the game to win the contest for the Phoenix against the Western Sydney Wanderers, they'll be delighted that he's on their side this time round.
100%. I think Tom Mohamed made a great impression last season. In a difficult season for Wellington, of course, and we hope they don't have to do the same thing again.
We're going to discuss that as well. But the question I have for you is, with so much disruption going on, with so many states in lockdown, do we have to consider, or does the A-League have to consider, or is it doing as we speak, consider a hub again, an A-League hub, as they have done before, in order to give the competition the best chance of, one, getting ahead, actually taking place, and getting the season off to a reasonable start? What are your thoughts across that?
Well, it's for smarter people than me to decide, of course, but it seems like it's, if not an inevitability, a likelihood that at least the season will have to start in a hub. I feel sorry for Wellington Phoenix particularly, and I feel sorry for a lot of the players if that's how they have to do it. All that hotel quarantining between. Some of the teams that played in the AFC Champions League spent upwards of 5, 6, 7 weeks in quarantine over the past couple of years. So, it's no fun, and it's separation from the players and their families, which is never good. But if that's the only way to get the season going, I think that's what the APL is going to push.
I'm going to tell you, I think it's absolutely galling that we've got a new television contract. We've got so many new options available to us as fans, And the biggest question will be, can we get the season up and running with so many questions still need to be answered? And you've got, of course, a bundle of premiers, a gaggle of premiers from across the country, all playing their own game, all running their own narrative. And I once believed that we actually lived in a commonwealth, one where we all lent on one another to get things done. Something's amiss, my friend.
Look, George, to be honest, I'm trying to steer clear of the news. I'm just filtering my internet activity by football.
Well, listen, that may well be nice for you, but I've got to bring you down to earth. Politics and sport almost inseparable as we speak.
Sadly, but it's true. It is true, and it has a massive impact. It will have a massive impact on the A-League. So.
Okay,
it's terrible timing for Paramount Plus and the new TV deal, of course.
Absolutely. And just go back for a moment to Wellington Phoenix. Do they have the option of going to Wollongong again?
Well,
in the current climate,
I'm not sure that's the place you'd want to end up. I'm not sure what the COVID numbers are like, but it's a little bit too close to Sydney for your liking. Maybe they'll have to find somewhere else. But
you're thinking Dubbo, Wagga,
something like that. I'm not sure. Maybe Western Australia is the place for the hub.
Don't give Mark McGowan any more to smile about. I'm over him. I think the world needs to open up, and we need to be smart about it. I'm actually just sitting here shaking my head at some of the discussion, some of the commentary, and some of the goings on. But I think you are right. They may have to go to that extreme in order to get the A-League season up and running.
Imagine the distance derby being a home game.
Oh, yes.
in Perth,
we're watching
Wellington.
We're watching it in so many other sports. We saw the rugby league, the NRL, we saw the AFL still having to make major changes. It still doesn't know where its grand final will be played. Imagine. You've got the netballers, really giving up an awful lot of their time and their families in order to participate and make a game of it. So I'm not surprised that the World Game is going to have to be challenged at this level. And it's interesting that it's happening here like this when we're just so excited to see the return of La Liga and the Premier League with full crowds. What have you made of the first couple of weeks?
The Premier League, it's been fantastic to have it back, and the atmosphere in the stadium just makes such a massive difference. I have to say, lost interest in the Premier League last season, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I thought, maybe it's the fans, maybe it's the schedule and so forth, and the players just aren't up to it. It's the fans. Don't you? It's 100% the atmosphere, and the impact of that atmosphere, whether it's perceptible or not for the players themselves, it certainly makes a difference to the viewer. And I've loved it, and I think there's so many interesting talking points in the Premier League at the moment. A lot of people say the transfer window should shut before the season starts. I totally disagree, because I think this month, where it's all still up in the air, is one of the most entertaining months in the competition.
Speak for yourself, Josh Parish.
So I'm sure Spurs fan over here doesn't agree.
Oh, mate, I've got to tell you, I sat up and watched Wolves play Spurs, or Spurs play Wolves at away from home, and it was the most gripping. And it wasn't because it was a great contest from Spurs; it was a sensational turnout by the fans of Wolves. Molineux must have been a spectacular place to be. I could hear it I could see it through the screen. I could hear it through the speakers. They were absolutely wowed every time Adama Traore would run down and dribble past 2 or 3 players. How we got through with that result, I'll never know. We did win 1-0. Eternally grateful that the 300 gamer Hugo Lloris managed to focus and stay right where he needed to stay when Adama broke through. I thought Eric Dyer had made one of those awful mistakes, and I thought, here we go, we're going to pay the penalty. But the goalkeeper in his 300th game for the club, the captain, just held up his end of the bargain and saved the boys. They played really, really well in defence, but by golly. And of course, you had the sort of Damocles over the top. It was, will Harry play for Spurs again? Or are we going to get a phone call in the next half an hour telling us Man City has just paid £150 million to get him through?
It was a fascinating melodrama going on over there. I did enjoy it. And I have to say, I did. And I enjoyed it most because the Wolves fans were chanting, Harry Kane, he's working from home, which I thought was brilliant banter. Fantastic.
They said much more than that.
I'm sure. But that was the most witty of the
correct.
banter between the fans.
What did you make of the last 15, 20 minutes when he did come on?
Yeah, look, I don't think it was, the best football he's ever played. But the celebrations at the final whistle with his teammates look very much genuine. I think it's hard for Harry Kane to pretend to be the kind of petulant, upset star player who's down tools, so to speak. I just don't think that's really in his DNA. And he's tried to do a little impression of that kind of footballer chucking a hissy fit, which we're so accustomed to now, and it didn't really come off that genuine. I think when you could kind of tell that his heart wasn't really in it, and he just wants Spurs to win, or whichever team he's playing for.
Speaking of hissy fits, people can call us at any time they wish and tell us what's the best hissy fit they've ever seen a player throw. What's the best one that you can remember or muster?
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
We'll ponder that. We'll ponder that and just continue the program.
Yeah, it's interesting some of the details that have come out since, of course, he made that announcement that he was going to stay, and the fact that Manchester City actually made no further bids after June, which is fascinating. Levy just refused to negotiate, so the most they were prepared to offer was 100 million plus 20 million or so in add-ons, and Levy just flatly refused to negotiate. So, it's hard for a player to exercise that kind of player power when there's no, present bid that's come in for him.
Do you think he was badly advised not to have a release clause in his contract?
I think he was badly advised to sign a 6-year deal. You see it in a lot of sports where high-profile players are able to exert their influence by signing shorter contracts. I mean, LeBron is the great example because he just signs 1-year contracts every year and keeps it rolling, so he could leave at any time. And he's so good that whichever NBA team he's playing for just has to play ball, metaphorically and literally.
I was just going to say, Giannis, the Greek freak, has done the opposite. He signed, I think, a 10-year contract worth nearly $230 million. But that establishes him at, again, a different level. And I noticed that he's put some of that money of his now into another one of the teams in his state, that's Minnesota. And he's bought a share of the Brewers, which is the baseball team. So he's taking a leaf out of, Curry and others who in small market towns actually become major players and do just more than play the game. They build quite a fiefdom, don't they? And put something back too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a totally different tactic to make yourself so beloved that the fans sort of worship at your feet, and he can do no wrong. Whereas
that's correct.
A player who's trying to exert that kind of influence and negotiate their next move, if you've got 3 years left on your contract, that's very, very hard to do. And the other thing that Harry Kane doesn't have is he doesn't have a super agent on his side that will have other contracts with other players at the same club and can say, none of these guys are signing new deals if you don't let Harry Kane go to Manchester City. So if he had a George Mendes in his corner, for all the faults of a guy like Mendes is obviously out for himself, that does give you more leverage than having, the family member that you trust negotiating your contracts, because they've got no leverage over the other players.
What do you make of Mino Raiola's efforts to get young Haaland the sort of contract that people dream about? That is €1 million a week.
Well, if there's any player who's going to command those kinds of wages, I think it's going to be Haaland, because it's just so tantalising, the potential and the amount of years he's potentially got left. He's just sort of superhuman that he's peaked kind of so early, and he doesn't really need to get any better.
You've bought into the storyline, the narrative?
Look, I think there are certain limitations in his game depending on the style of the team that he's playing for. It's a bit like Lukaku in the sense that he's better when he's on the break, he's better when he's facing forward, he's better when he's dribbling. He doesn't have the kind of back-to-goal subtlety that a player like Lewandowski has, for example. And maybe that has slightly dissuaded Manchester City from pursuing him, whereas Kane obviously does have that kind of playmaking ability. And so potentially Haaland doesn't really fit in a Guardiola team that wants 80% of the ball. He's better in maybe a Chelsea side that is happy with 50% of the ball or 40% sometimes and can just absolutely sting you with those lethal counterattacks. But given that Chelsea have invested so heavily in Lukaku, I doubt they'll go for Haaland as well. I just don't know who's going to pay him that sort of money. I mean, you obviously turn to the oil-rich super clubs like City and of course PSG. FFP obviously should be at least a side concern. We've shown that that's sort of paper-thin regulation rather recently. But perhaps the barrier between Haaland and City is Guardiola's style, and that may not be a factor for much longer.
No, that's right. We're hearing now that Pep Guardiola says that he's happy to play through this season, and he has another season on his contract, and that'll be it. He wants a break after that. What do you make of that, decision or that announcement that has basically seeped through the cracks just when people were thinking he was there for another 5-6 years? When we now know it'll be this year plus one more. It's
kind of stunning. I'm really surprised because he's the coach with the greatest job security in the world, so he could have his pick of a contract. He doesn't really need the year-to-year performance. He's got the faith of the City group behind him, no matter really what happens. So I'm a little surprised by this, because Man City is such a blank canvas for him to work with. There's no kind of expectations of playing style. It's all him. But apparently he's a little burnt out and would like to go to international management, which I think would be equally fascinating and would add a little bit more glamour back into it. Who would he coach internationally? He reckons Brazil will only have Brazilian coaches. So put him out of Brazil. Who would he coach? Would he coach Argentina? I think Argentina would be a really good fit. I don't think he'd coach Spain because he's such a proud Catalan, and that would maybe clash with his sensibilities. Yeah. That's interesting. Maybe not. Maybe he just pick all Barcelona players, like Luis Enrique doesn't pick any Madrid players. That might be a way to do it. But he might coach a national team where he has sort of no connection to, and maybe that leaves a sort of politics out of it. But I think Argentina would be a terrific fit, and I would be fascinated to see if Messi is persuaded to stay on longer, if Guardiola is willing to coach them. But of course, it's ironic that he's pursuing this move to international management, and he mentioned the Copa America specifically in those comments. Usually the Argentina job would be immediately available to Guardiola because they've always just sacked somebody. But of course they've just won the Copa America now, so they're probably not going to change anything. You think? Well, it depends how the World Cup goes next year, I suppose. He might do an Alistair Clarkson, take a break, a couple of years or a year, and a sabbatical. And he's taken one before, of course. Went to New York and found himself. Down under. He could travel down under and see what Melbourne City's doing. I mean, I wouldn't bet against him making a guest appearance in the president's box with you, George. I think it's every chance. Could you imagine? That'd be fabulous.
Listen, let's just get back to what we were talking about earlier, and that was the state of play with some of the big players out there who are commanding enormous fees. I've noticed that the latest news out of Real Madrid is that they're prepared to put 220 million euros, or is it dollars, to grab young Kylian Mbappe a year early from PSG. Do you think this is just more hype at the moment, or there is a chance before the window closes that he goes, you know what? I had a couple of great training sessions with Messi. Do I really want to play with him? No, I want to be the number one man, and I can do that at Real Madrid and start a whole new era there.
This is a really curious one for me. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily bet against Real Madrid doing something very irresponsible with their money that they don't necessarily have. That seems to be kind of the modus operandi. But I just don't see the value in spending 160 million euros or whatever it was in dollars, George, on a guy who wants to join you in 12 months anyway for free. And we know free transfers aren't free. There are signing on fees, and the contracts goes up as a result because the agents see an opportunity to leverage a little bit more money out of the club if they're not paying a transfer fee. So, but it will be a lot less than 160 million euros to sign Kylian Mbappe.
We saw with Cristiano Ronaldo when he went to Juventus, the money they made just in shirts, in merchandise, in that first couple of months. And it's quite extraordinary. I'm just wondering if Real might think that they're bereft. The great Galacticos is almost, no more. There are one or two last, glowing embers, but the great side is almost over, and they need a new headliner. And this is why they're throwing the money, or prepared to throw the money. Could that be the reason why they're going down that pathway or contemplating it? Because I would have thought 3 or 4 weeks ago, if you'd said to me Real Madrid would throw this sort of money around, I would have thought, like Barca, they're almost broke, aren't they? After some of the goings on and some of the spending that they've had to play out, or is Real in a much better financial state than Barca?
Well, they're not €1 billion in debt, or 2 billion, or whatever it is with Barcelona. So they're in a better position than Barcelona are. That's not to say they're in rude financial health. None of La Liga really is. They've just signed a massive TV contract with ESPN in the States, and then Messi immediately left. So I'm not sure how ESPN feels about that investment. But that alleviates it to some extent. But they do have to make salary cap cuts, as do all teams in the Liga, through these strict COVID, basically austerity measures that have been introduced by Javier Tebas. And they're really sticking to them. There's no exceptions, even for Madrid, who often get the preferential treatment because everyone in the country seems to support them. Correct. I do think it makes sense to sign Mbappe. I just don't think it makes sense to sign him now, because any normal club with a player with a contract expiring in 12 months would absolutely cash in on them if someone offered them 160 million euros. PSG are not a normal club. So, if he leaves on a free, it doesn't hurt them nearly as much as it would anybody else, because they've got these vast resources.
And while we're talking, their new season is underway. And more importantly, the training sessions are suggesting that Lionel Messi will be starting and making his appearance in the PSG colours as early as this week.
Yes, and I think Ligue 1 needs it, because they've just fallen behind Portugal in the coefficient rankings. So it's no longer part of the big five, so to speak. I'm not sure how long that'll last with the all-star crew that PSG have assembled. Look, the Mbappe situation, I think this may just be a show of intent to Mbappe, because they know that offer is going to be rejected. That we really want you and we're willing to spend for you, but your club won't let you go, so we'll get you next summer. It's maybe playing those kinds of games.
So you're thinking it's more saber rattling than anything else, saying, hello, look at us.
I think so. And Kylian Mbappe has made it quite clear that if he's going to leave, he's going to want to play for Real Madrid, because he supported them when he was a kid or whatever.
Absolutely.
So I think it's inevitable. It's just a matter of time. And Real Madrid should really be using that 160 million euros to build a team around Mbappe that will be ready for him when he gets there.
Yeah, touche. All right, let's bring the conversation back to the A-League and what's happening in Australia. State of Our Football Nation on FNR is the program. Josh Parish, George Donikian. Let's find out, what do you make of the latest news that Beshar Barisha, someone who's given us a lot to get excited about over the last half a dozen years, hasn't been able to strike a meaningful A-League deal with anyone here, and he wants to head overseas. He's 36. He wants one more year. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I mean, far be it for me to tell Beshar Barisha that he's finished, right?
You can't tell him anything at any time. Yeah, you're right.
Absolutely not. I mean, he's...
But he arrived, what is it? He arrived in 2011. And he had three wicked seasons with Brisbane Roar. Again, it was a young man by the name of Ange Postecoglou that saw something in him and brought him across. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was 2011. You're right, and he was part of a fantastic couple of Brisbane Roar teams. Obviously, infamous for that grand final against Perth Glory and the penalty that attracted so much debate. He arrived as a bit of a hothead, I think it's fair to say, with his bleached mohawk. That it turned out he only sported that haircut because he wanted his mum to recognise him in the crowd on the pitch. Which is an endearing story that we actually revealed on FNR's The Green Room last year.
Look, I've got to say, that was one of the best programs we've done in ages. We've been on air for 4 years, and you guys should be commended. That Green Room, super initiative. I believe the club is going to do more of it this year. Is that the latest?
I think so. Western United have got a lot to sort out at the moment, and the Green Room is a little further down on the list. But hopefully they'll be coming back when we're able to open up the studio again.
Well, they're going to come back. They've got a whole new coach, and he's pretty busy.
Mm-hmm.
He's got there's a crop of new players that are trying to settle into Western United. You told me, and I believe you, that Jamie Young is deciding that Brisbane is no longer the right place for him to hang his gloves. He's going to come down and play. How long's the contract for Jamie Young at Western United?
I'm not sure, actually. It'll be 1 or 2 years. I'm not sure.
Again, I'm reminded the keepers can play till 45. So, he's got, as long as he keeps fit, and he is tremendously a committed professional, I think he'll do a tremendous job.
Yeah, I think so too. But back to the Barisha situation, I find it hard to believe that there's not an A-League club who could offer him at least a spot on the bench and an opportunity for him to fight for his place in the first team. I actually find that quite hard to believe.
Impact player.
Yeah, whether Barisha can bring himself to be a bench player is quite another matter entirely. He's got the kind of ego that all the great strikers need, but maybe that doesn't really lend itself to a similar change in role. So there's talk today from Triple M in South Australia that they're in talks with a veteran striker who turns 37 next year, which fits Beshar Barisha's description to a T. So maybe Adelaide will pull a surprise and he'll stay in Australia after all. I hope so.
How old is Isaias, the Spaniard?
He's a little younger than Bess, I believe.
Okay, because he's had 2 years in Qatar, where the World Cup, next year's World Cup, will take place.
He's 34,
and he's just come back, and lo and behold, he wants to play FFA Cup for the Reds again, and he's re-signed. So there you go.
And a 3-year deal as well, which surprises me a little bit at his age.
There you go. But his talent. It shone last time around. Do you think he's lost much? It was never about pace. It was always about quality and touch, and and a great creative mind. He's going to be a great provider, I think, especially with all those young stars that we saw or we got a glimpse of in last A-League season playing for the Adelaide Reds.
Yeah, look, George, I think this is not going to endear me to the Adelaide United supporters, but
Oh,
I
here
actually
we
think
go.
this is a bit of a mistake, this contract. It's 3 years long for a player who's past his peak. I mean, Isaias is iconic, and I'm sure the Reds fans, they won't care what I think because they've got a great emotional attachment to this guy. And, as you say, he's a great professional. He's going to be a leader and all that kind of intangible stuff around the club. But they do have this crop of young midfielders who need game time. And I think this is going to take away from some of the guys who've been progressing so well. I mean, Carvalho was a standout last season, particularly when he was given an opportunity in midfield. He also played well at left back, of course.
You're right. He made great strides. His game advanced appreciably throughout the season.
Yeah, and then they've got Joe Coletti and Louis Dorigo. There's a lot of homegrown and young products in the centre of the park for Adelaide. I'm not sure they need to be taking minutes off them, but perhaps there's a need for a veteran presence in there that they don't have at the moment.
One of their former stars, former youngsters that came through the Reds and then moved to City and then moved to Western Wanderers rather. I'm talking about Bruce Kamau. He's decided to leave the A-League. He wants to rev up his chances of playing for the Socceroos. And guess where he's gone to play?
He's off to the mythical Isle of Crete, is he not?
Yeah, that's right. He's gone and joined the Greek Super League, playing for Offi in Crete. And I tell you what, he may well have given him his chances a pretty big boost because we've got a couple of World Cup qualifiers, namely against China and Vietnam coming up very, very soon. Yeah. And I think with the restrictions going to be imposed on a lot of our A-League stars, this may well propel him forward and give him a chance to maybe be an add-on. Arnie may see him as a terrific young player. He's 26. Might say to him, "Hey, come on over and show us what you've got." I think he's got some talent, but yeah, interesting stuff. Has he got the game?
You know what? You know who Bruce Kamau reminds me of? Not in terms of playing style necessarily, but more in terms of career trajectory, is Jesse Lingard, sort of perennial youngster.
Ooh.
It's the guy who burst onto the scene early and then slightly stagnated for quite some time and was always referred to as a young player, but is now past his mid-20s. But he had that revival season last year at Western Sydney, much like Jesse Lingard did in his loan spell at Western United. At West Ham, sorry. West Ham United.
I was just going to say, Lingard last year or the end of this season in Britain at the EPL, he was a revelation for West Ham. Many people had thought his career had peaked, but he was playing some exhilarating football. Now he's gone back to United, thinking that he can make that first team squad. Ordinarily, I would have thought he'd fit in quite well as an impact player, but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer doesn't look like he's going to include him too often. So why wouldn't you go back to West Ham, who, by the way, are top of the EPL table?
Yeah, we had a West Ham fan watching, actually, so that's the only thing I care about in the Premier League is West Ham top of the tree. Look, I was slightly surprised by that. He has made a bench appearance. I think he came on against Southampton quite late, Jesse Lingard.
What, for 2 minutes?
Yeah, a couple of minutes. It's a hard team to crack at the moment. There's a lot of competition for places with Jadon Sancho and so forth, but he's a United Academy player.
Hang on. Wait a moment. They were a great side against Leeds week 1 of the EPL. They played Southampton last week, and they got found out.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're playing particularly well. There's just lots of players who have, there's lots of options, and whether he's a piece of the puzzle
perhaps
that fits.
Too many options?
I'm not sure. It's kind of the midfield conundrum for United at the moment. So Jesse Lingard certainly doesn't fix that. I'm a little disappointed that Donny van der Beek has been so underutilised since he joined a year ago.
He's been pushed even further back. If you read some of the commentary coming out of the club and around the club base, it maybe he should consider a move.
I think he should, because one of the great wasted talents at United, and a long tradition of wasted talents. I mean, Shinji Kagawa comes to mind.
Life's too short, and football life is even shorter.
100%.
If you're not going to get a go, you've got to be brave. You've got to take the bit between your teeth and say to yourself, I believe in my talents, I'm going to ship them anywhere or somewhere else. And I'm thinking, Jesse Lingard, if I had any advice, if I was a player agent, I'd say to him, mate, get back and really give your career and your chances to play for England in the World Cup next year.
For the Netherlands, you mean?
Yeah, Jesse Lingard.
Oh, Jesse Lingard. Sorry, I was talking about Donny van der Beek.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about Jesse Lingard.
Yeah, right.
And for Van der Beek, exactly. Get out of there, give yourself a chance to play and build up that confidence, because only a year or so ago, he was the stunning young talent that Manchester United had just picked up and would be a tremendous player for a generation. Well, that didn't last long.
Yeah, one of the Ajax crew that was destined for big things, and I think still is. He was injured for the Euros and lost that opportunity to put himself in the shop window. So perhaps that's the reason he hasn't been involved for United so far. But I'm still super impressed every time I see him play, and those rare glimpses we get. I think he moves really well off the ball. I'm not sure he really is given the license with Bruno Fernandes ahead of him in the team to make those kinds of runs into the box, which made a name for himself at Ajax as the kind of most advanced of a midfield three. I don't think he fits in tactically with what United are trying to do particularly, but I still think he's an intelligent player who could play a role, and certainly, different players, but Nemanja Matic was clearly off the pace against Southampton. And even if you tell Donny van der Beek that he has to play as a defensive midfielder, which is out of his comfort zone, I still think he'd do a better job than Matic, whose legs are gone at this point and can't keep up with a team like Southampton who has so much energy and pressing capacity in midfield.
I remember Jose Mourinho in the documentary series All or Nothing saying picking a team is like a puzzle. Yeah. And you've got to find answers to complete the puzzle. I'm thinking at the moment, Ola is struggling.
It's 2 games.
But it's the departure. It's the variation between the 2 games. Against the side that came at them and gave them a chance to play expansive football, United looked amazing. They looked like premiership ready. Against Southampton, they looked like a side that didn't know whether to attack or defend. When young Bruno lost the ball he was sitting there waiting for the referee to give a free kick, and the ball was in the back of the net. And I'm thinking, Bruno, wake up. The rules have slightly been amended. The referees have taken a slightly different handle on how they're going to officiate this season. You better pick up. Have you made that same assessment as a referee? Have you seen that they're now giving them a bit more room?
Fair challenge. And there's a bit of more of a laissez-faire approach across the board to refereeing in the Premier League this year with VAR and all that. It just seems to be totally logically inconsistent, but as little interference as possible. And I don't mind it. It's almost like not having VAR, which would be better. I mean, if this is how we have to have VAR, which is basically no VAR, I'm happy with that.
Says the old referee in you.
Just hate it. But, it doesn't make any sense, the approach. There's penalties being given that aren't penalties, and and they don't intervene. There's just no logical consistency to the whole approach. It's just sort of just vibes, just whatever they're feeling.
Yeah, look, I've got to say to you, I've enjoyed some of the officiating this year in the opening couple of rounds of the EPL. I love the fact that you have to do something silly. Although the red card to who was it? The Norwich player, was it the Norwich player who played West Ham only the other day? He was off balance and he stepped forward, and he did step very, very badly onto the foot of one of the Southampton players, and it could have broken his leg. It didn't, thank God. He did complete the game, which I think goes a long way to whether it's a red card or whether it's a yellow. Had he been so injured that he couldn't play on, I would have thought it's a red card. Do you think it was a fair call, or should he have been given a yellow card?
I know the incident you're referring to, and I think it was pretty much unintentional. It must have
It was-
hurt.
yeah,
but
exactly,
I
exactly.
don't think he knew that the player stuck out his leg. So yeah, I think that was harsh. There was also a decision in the first round, was Newcastle West Ham, and there was a penalty
I saw-
given, which Souček scored the rebound from, and I he cleanly took the ball, but there was no intervention on it. So, and that virtually swung the game. That was the goal that made it 3-2 to West Ham, who've been playing really well, but they weren't having it all their own way that day. So there's a couple of decisions that have kind of raised eyebrows for me.
I
But Mikel
Norwich,
Antonio
actually,
is in the form of his life, so
I was just
that's
going to say,
fantastic to see.
I mentioned Norwich. It was actually who do they play? It was West Ham against Leicester. It was actually Leicester that copped that decision, and it changed the game. Leicester really struggled from that moment on. They lost a player, and of course, from that moment on, West Ham just dominated the play, and especially in the last 15, 20 minutes, Antonio looked irrepressible. Hasn't he matured as a number 9?
He's been great. I'm not sure if you saw any of the Monday Night Football segment they ran on that game, which some of that, obviously we can't get it here, but some of those segments get uploaded to YouTube, and they're a great watch if you get a chance, because Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher notice things as former defenders that I would never really pick up on. And it's just the best possible use of former players' experience when they go into that kind of detail about the one-on-one defending and what Soyuncu did wrong playing against a bigger player in Antonio. And they actually, Gary Neville brought up some old highlights of Jamie Carragher playing against Drogba, making many of the same mistakes, which is always a fun element of that show, the way the two have a go at each other.
That's a priceless opportunity when you have that inventory or that library, and you can refer, and you've got a production crew that's pretty sharp, and they see something. It's the sort of thing we used to do at Channel 9 when we had the cricket, because you have the library and because you have a production team that's pretty smart, pretty alert. They're looking for those great opportunities to go back and say, oh, well, you're talking about the bowling here. You did a similar thing. And you didn't change your tactics, and look what happened to you. So again, a tremendous opportunity when you have a great production team. They see something and they go with it, and it makes for compelling viewing in any sport, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that highlights that segment and the mistakes that the individual mistakes that some of the Leicester defenders made. Highlights their usual style of defending, which is very much on the front foot and high pressing, and that changes entirely what you're doing as a centre back. Usually, you're chasing balls that have been pumped in behind you, and it requires a different skill set to what you need to do, kind of just on the edge of your own box. And the fact that they got a player sent off in that very strange circumstance means that they were forced to defend much deeper, and because pressing just doesn't work if you've got a man down. So that certainly swung the game, but it did highlight a few gaps in the. I guess they don't really have that in their locker, Leicester, to be a team that has to shut up shop and play on the edge of their own box. It's not really their identity, and I didn't think that was highlighted by Antonio's goals.
But it just goes to show you yet again how important a good decision is or a poor decision is, and how it can impact a contest. Sometimes it's very fair, sometimes it's grossly unfair. And I thought it changed the game immediately. And on reflection, I was surprised that he got a red. The referee did see it in when it was live. He then had to go to the sideline and see it again. And I can remember the commentator saying, I hope he gets a chance to see it not only in slow motion, but also in live action. To see the build-up. And once you see him pushed, he's off balance. There is no, we say this all the time, and I think it's one of the hardest things to prove, intent. I love the lawmakers when they put intent. You can't tell what people are thinking. people in that moment, in that blink of a second, will stick an arm out, will stick an elbow out, they'll catch the ball in a defensive setup. You've seen it happen time and time again. But in
George,
this instance, he was off balance.
George, we've got the Hawkeye. We just need to invent the mind's eye, and then we can read the intent. But we better go, because we've got the If You Know Your History crew waiting, and Paul Mavridis has got a very special guest today who I always enjoy hearing from, and that's Tony Pasoglia, who's been doing a phenomenal job working with Football Victoria on their historical records and uncovering some stories. And I just think it's fantastic that the State Federation has heeded the calls of historians like Paul and Ian that we're so lucky to have at the station to establish this kind of position. And Tony Pasoglia has been doing some terrific work. So I'm really keen to hear what he's been up to during lockdown, because there are so many online resources available now like Trove. So I'm sure he's been whiling away the hours on Trove, finding out something about our history that we didn't necessarily know before.
I'm just going to say to you, I'd love the day that we, with some of these new developments that we're seeing, across Victoria, I'm just hoping that there is room for a museum, because it needs to pay homage to some tremendous talent that we've seen over the last 50, 60 years. And it would be wonderful to have it there, to pay homage not only to the men, but the women who came before, who are now part of the Matildas, and to see some of the former referees who made their way to the FIFA rankings, represented Australia overseas in some of the biggest competitions. And again, we've seen an Australian do a fabulous job, Chris Beath, at the Olympics. I thought he did a magnificent job in a very, very, tough game between two very, very gifted sides, and he kept it as smooth as possible. You agree?
Yeah, these referees come under a lot of criticism in the A-League, but he's establishing himself in the international stage, which is fabulous to see. But George, we better leave the history boys to it. It's been a pleasure as always. It's flown by. And next week we'll be chatting to Carl Robinson. We will. Look after yourself. And also we'll be catching up with some of the new additions to Melbourne City. So catch us next week for State of Our Football Nation on FNR.
You're listening to the State of Our Football Nation on FNR.